Ladies and gentlemen, welcome into an updated Bracketology here as we have officially entered March. It is the 7th of March, and we're going to take a look, of course, at the bracket matrix. First thing first, you do have three consensus, basically guaranteed one seeds at this point. It is Purdue, UConn, and Houston. All three of those teams a number one seed in every single bracket in the updated bracket matrix. And then that fourth one seed, this is what we're watching. You have Tennessee, you have North Carolina, and Arizona. Mainly right now, though, it does seem to be a feud between Tennessee and Arizona. Tennessee getting a win last night on the road against South Carolina. They right now just slightly seemingly have that fourth and final number one seed over Arizona, but it's close depending on what bracket you look at. North Carolina there is a 2 seed. They could move to the 1 line if they win their conference tournament. Arizona could pretty much secure a 1 seed, and even Tennessee. I mean, the SEC this year obviously way better than the Pac-12. The ACC also having a bit of a down year. You do have Marquette as well on the 2 line, a solid 2 seed, as well as Iowa State, the final 2 seed. Baylor sitting on the 3 line, top of the 3 line. Kansas, Duke, and Creighton, all 3 seeds. Alabama on the 4 line. Illinois, Kentucky jolts up to a 4 seed right now, along with Auburn. So 3 SEC teams on the 4 line at this point. That'll be an interesting conference tournament. On the 5 line, it is San Diego State, BYU, Clemson, and South Carolina. Wow. Those are some teams I could see getting upset in the first round against a 12 seed. But those are the 5 seeds right now. The 6 seeds, Washington State. What a great year for Washington State. Imagine Washington State wins the Pac-12 tournament, and they could be a 4 seed. They could move up all the way to the 4 line if they win the Pac-12 tournament. Wisconsin down to a 6, not surprising. Dayton, who has struggled recently, down to a 6, and Utah State. The Mountain West is a complete mosh pit. What I'll say about the Mountain West is I think one team out of the Mountain West will make it to the Elite Eight. Which team that is, I have no clue. They are all so even. It is crazy. Moving on to the 7 line, Florida, St. Mary's, Texas Tech, and Gonzaga. Gonzaga trending way up recently. They've been one of the better teams the past 2 weeks in college basketball. Boise State, Nevada, Texas, and Colorado State. 3 Mountain West teams on the 8 line. Northwestern, a team that I'm watching. TCU, Oklahoma, Mississippi State on the 9 line. Nebraska, MSU, Michigan State down to a 10 seed. Florida Atlantic, Villanova. Villanova was a team, they bet on the bubble. This is good news for them sitting on the 10 line right now, clearly in most tournaments. You can see 104 out of 113, so they're in over 90% of the tournaments. And then the 11 line, these teams squarely on the bubble, possibly in a play-in game. Virginia, it's hard to see making the tournament. We'll see. They could have a run in the ACC tournament. You do have St. John's, a team that's loved analytically. New Mexico, Seton Hall, Indiana State sitting on the 11 line, along with Richmond out of the A-10. The 12 line, South Florida, all they do is win. They're on a crazy run right now. Princeton out of the Ivy getting a 12 seed. They had the run last year. Could they possibly go on another Cinderella run, along with Grand Canyon and McNeese as well? Moving to the 13 line, it is Appalachian State, Sanford, UC Irvine, along with La Tech. No real surprises there. The 14 line, Vermont, Akron, Charleston, High Point. High Point up to a 14 seed. They're an interesting team to watch. They do have to win their conference, but they're huge favorites in the Big South. The 15 line is Oakland, Morehead State, Colgate, and Eastern Washington. No real surprises there. And then the 16 line, it is Quinnipiac, South Dakota State, Norfolk State, Grambling, Merrimack, and Stetson. The Atlantic Sun has seen several upsets in their conference tournament, so now Stetson has vaulted into the possible auto bid there as a 16 seed. And then the other team squarely on the bubble right now, it is Utah, basically in, 50% of brackets. Colorado, Providence, Wake Forest trending down after a few recent losses. Iowa, Drake, Pittsburgh, and Syracuse getting a shout out in one bracket as well. Now, taking a look at the top 15 teams over the past 2 weeks, these are teams that analytically are playing the best in a shortened sample. Really, many of these teams only playing 2 or 3 games, but it's interesting in terms of how are teams doing recently? What's the dominant factor? UConn still the number 1 overall team. Gonzaga the number 2 team. Creighton playing really well, having 2 good games. Duke 3-0 in their last 3 games. Utah also sitting as a top 5 team. Arizona, St. John's, not surprised there. Tennessee, they're having a run to possibly being a 1 seed. Auburn, Texas. UT Arlington out of nowhere. Appalachian State, really good defensive team. UC Irvine, another very likely 13 seed that people are probably going to pick to have an upset, maybe a Cinderella run. You know one of these teams is going to have a Cinderella run, one of these 13 seeds, because they've been so consistent this year. Pittsburgh and then Baylor as well. How about Pittsburgh at 2-1, a top 15 team analytically? Let's take a look at another bracket here. I always go through this one. This is the most deserving bracket. The 1 seeds, Purdue, Houston, UConn, and Tennessee. So looks like they agree with the bracket matrix on the 1 seeds. The 2 seeds, Iowa State sitting at the top of the 2 line. I mean, if Iowa State did win the Big 12, they might actually be a 1 seed. Minimum, they'd be at the top of the 2 line if Iowa State won the Big 12. They get so many quality wins. I don't think it's going to happen. I'm just saying. You do have Arizona, North Carolina, and Baylor on the 2 line. In terms of most deserving, the quality wins in the tough Big 12. Possibly moving up to a 2 seed. Nobody's been talking about them. Marquette in this bracket down to a 3. You do have Duke, Kansas, and Creighton as well on the 3 line. Auburn, Illinois, BYU up to a 4, and Nevada a 4 seed here, even though analytically they're ranked 36. The 5 line, you've got Bama, Gonzaga, South Carolina, and Kentucky. That's a much stronger 5 line in my opinion. Like, if those were the 5v12 games, I'd probably only maybe pick South Carolina to lose. Those other teams are very strong. Gonzaga is really strong analytically. Now, some of that might be because they play in an easier conference, and it's just easy to look good in terms of analytics when you're blowing out bad teams. You know, that could be it, but they did beat St. Mary's. I think Gonzaga, a lot of blue bloods are kind of under the radar. At least, you know, Gonzaga is like a modern day blue blood. To me, they're under the radar. Duke is under the radar. Nobody's really talking about North Carolina. It's interesting. You do also have on the 6th line, San Diego State, Utah State, Clemson, and Washington State. The 7 line, Wisconsin down to a 7 seed, TCU, Dayton, and Texas Tech. The 8 line, Florida, Oklahoma, Northwestern, and Texas. Moving on to the 9 seeds, Colorado State, Boise State, Nebraska, and St. Mary's down to a 9 seed, possibly in an 8v9 game. I think that'd be a fairly easy pick. I would probably pick St. Mary's over one of those. Well, actually, Florida. I'm surprised Florida is an 8 seed in this. Florida, to me, is like a 6 or a 7, and a lot of people, I was talking about Florida yesterday. Florida has a team that profiles as an Elite 8 type team. They remind me of like Miami of last year. They've just got good guard play. It just feels like Florida, even if they're a 7 or an 8 seed, is going to go on a deep run. Moving on to the 10 line, Michigan State. That's another team people I'm sure are going to pick with Izzo, Seton Hall, St. John's in the bracket. You can see analytically they're 23, which is crazy high. Look at Michigan State at 18, along with Virginia. The 11 seeds that would be in the tournament without a play-in, Colorado, they are loved in terms of analytics. They have good guard play. And then FAU also. The 12 line, Indiana State, James Madison here. Princeton and Grand Canyon. The 13 seeds, pretty much always the same. McNeese, Sanford. Oh, I guess they moved Vermont up in this one. Vermont and UC Irvine. The 14 seeds, Charleston. La Tech down to a 14. High Point along with Morehead State. The 15 line, it is Colgate, Youngstown State, Akron, and Weber State. And the 16 seeds, it is Quinnipiac along with South Dakota State. Now moving to the teams that would be in the first 4 games, Utah, Villanova, Providence, and Pittsburgh. And then the first teams out, Mississippi State, New Mexico, Butler, Iowa. A&M gets a shout out along with Wake Forest, Drake. And how about South Florida? That is kind of crazy. South Florida was definitely in terms of the bracket matrix. They were in 89 out of the 113 brackets. Yeah, South Florida, I'm guessing, will certainly be in the tournament. Moving on to the actual Joe Lunardi. I'm not sure when this was updated. This is the most recent bracket. You can see Purdue a 1 seed, no surprise there. You've got Texas, Mississippi State in an 8v9 game. That's pretty common. You've got Clemson taking on Richmond in the 5v12 game. Kentucky and App State could be a fun matchup. Defense versus offense. Wisconsin, South Florida. Certainly, South Florida very likely going to be the pick for many people against a struggling Wisconsin. Baylor and Oakland, Dayton and Oklahoma, and then Marquette, the 2 seed in that region, taking on Sam Houston. Seems like a very, well, you don't want to underestimate Baylor. That's why I was going to say this seems like a good draw for Marquette. But again, you don't want to underestimate Baylor. Moving on to the East, you do have UConn as the number 1 overall seed. Texas Tech taking on Nebraska. I'm just getting the vibe that Nebraska is going to be a one and done. They're going to make the tournament, they're going to win a game, and then they're going to lose in the second round. That's just the vibe I'm getting from them. But I do like Texas Tech. If Texas Tech was involved in an 8v9 game, I'd probably pick them. Personally, Washington State taking on Princeton. That's a tough matchup there for Washington State. I'd still probably pick Washington State. It's just the narrative. Do we really think the Ivy is going to get another upset? I don't know, maybe. Alabama, UC Irvine. I like Alabama to very easily make the Sweet 16 out of those games right there. You do have South Carolina taking on either Seton Hall or Virginia. Kansas and Vermont, 3v14 game. And then Gonzaga, Villanova in a 7v10 game. Fun little matchup there. Normally those teams are 1 and 2 seeds, although I guess recently Villanova's kind of fallen off. And then North Carolina, the 2 seed, they're taking on Colgate. Moving on to the West, he still does have Arizona as a 1 seed. I mean, whenever I see a Joe Lunardi bracket, it's Arizona no matter what is always a 1 seed, I swear. They're a 1 seed here, taking on Little Rock or Grambling, Nevada, and MSU. Yeah, so immediately if I was Arizona, I'd be kind of annoyed. Really, Nevada is probably better, at least analytically, than an 8 seed. Michigan State, we all know the annoyance if you're a 1 seed possibly facing them in the second round. Like, look at Arizona's second round matchup compared to what Houston's would be. Although I do like Northwestern, I will say. But I don't know, man. If I was Arizona, I would not be happy facing either Nevada or Michigan State in the second round. BYU, Grand Canyon. I mean, I think BYU's a solid team. It's hard to really get a great gauge on BYU. Those Big 12 teams, they always win at home, they lose on the road. So it's hard. Illinois, Samford. I like Illinois a lot. I think they've got an explosive offense. Florida as a 6 seed, that seems legitimate. Possibly taking on New Mexico or Wake Forest. Yeah, Florida should do well. Creighton and High Point. I thought High Point was going to be a 15 seed. Creighton is a team that's played better recently. I like Florida to advance, possibly beat Creighton in the second round. Boise State and FAU. FAU, very, high upside team. We saw what happened last year. I'm sure a lot of people would pick them. And I'm sure a lot of people would pick FAU over Iowa State in the second round. That would be my guess, because you do have Iowa State taking on Eastern Washington, a 15 seed. And then the South, it is Houston versus South Dakota State. You can see the 5v12 matchup, Auburn and McNeese. McNeese is a scary team to watch. They profile really well. San Diego State and Charleston. And then you do have Utah State taking on Indiana State. Wow, so McNeese and Indiana State both in the same South region, although they are split up. Duke and Akron, and then St. Mary's taking on TCU. I'd like St. Mary's in that matchup, Tennessee and Quinnipiac. So looking at Tennessee's potential run, Tennessee is a team I'm considering picking to go very far. I just think things line up for Rick Barnes and that team this year with the way they're structured. Now, you could argue they're not amazing on offense, but I think they check the boxes for me. I'm going to have to, do some more research. I'm going to have to, see how they play in the SEC tournament, but just looking at this possible run, if I was Tennessee, I really wouldn't want to face St. Mary's in the second round, but I think they'd beat them anyways. Yeah, that's not... I would much rather face a different 3 seed. Like, I would rather have Creighton as a 3 seed in my region than Duke. I think Duke is a sneaky team. You can say they've fattened up on some ACC teams, but they've got depth. They obviously have talent, and they have actual experience this year. Duke will be an interesting team to watch. But either way, guys, that is going to do it for this video. Make sure you follow me on X. Link to that's always in the description.